An innocent virgin gave herself to an old millionaire, but he was shattered on their first night. Clara Hayes had turned 18 just a week ago. A petite girl with wide, innocent eyes, soft brown hair tied hastily at the back, and a face still touched by the glow of childhood. To her, the world was still unfamiliar. Even fear itself felt new. That night, she stood before the revolving glass doors of the Astoria Grand Manhattan Hotel, drawing a deep breath. "Stay calm, Clara. It's just another shift. You'll be fine," she whispered to herself, though her palms were slick with sweat. Her footsteps echoed on the polished marble floor as she entered the grand lobby. Giant crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, scattering light like 1,000 shards of glass. Laughter blended with the smooth tones of a live jazz quartet, filling the air with elegance Clara had never belonged to. Her black server uniform clung awkwardly to her frame, feeling more like armor than clothing. In her hands, a silver tray of champagne glasses trembled with each step. "Don't spill. Don't spill," she repeated in her head, heart thudding like a drum urging her forward. Around her, men in tailored Italian suits, women in gowns studded with crystals, wrists glittering with diamonds. Clara felt like nothing more than a shadow, slipping between people who had never once feared the weight of rent. And then she saw him. Damian Cole, 28, the youngest founder to lead a multi-billion-dollar artificial intelligence empire. He entered the ballroom as if it belonged to him. Dark hair slicked back, his tailored suit framing a tall, commanding figure. Every movement radiated control. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara cold. Black, bottomless, chilling, like a starless night sky. For a single moment, his gaze locked on hers. Just 1 second, yet her whole body froze. Why is he looking at me? Clara lowered her head quickly, cheeks burning, steps quickening. But the feeling didn't fade. For over an hour, no matter where she went, the marble bar, the balcony upstairs, or near the piano where the quartet played soft, silky notes, she felt his eyes, steady, unblinking. Once she dared a glance. Her fear was confirmed. Damian Cole was watching. It wasn't lust. It was colder, sharper, the look of a man examining a rare item at a private auction. Her chest tightened. "You're imagining this. Just finish the shift, get paid, go home," she told herself. But the rational words couldn't drown out the weight of his stare. As midnight neared and guests began to leave, Clara let out a breath of relief. The night was nearly over. But then, the tall figure of Damian Cole stepped into her path. His voice was low, smooth, rich like aged whiskey. "How much are you being paid tonight?" Clara faltered, nearly dropping her tray. I don't understand." 200? 3? I'll give you 10 times that, tonight, in my penthouse." The words sliced through her like silk over steel, cutting deep into her pride. "What are you implying?" she managed, voice trembling. "No implications," Damian murmured, lips curving faintly. "One night. You name the price, no limits." The ballroom around her seemed to vanish. Her pulse thundered. A part of her wanted to scream, to throw the champagne in his face. Yet her legs felt rooted to the floor, trapped by his stare. "You're different," Damian said slowly. "Untouched. And me? I'm not used to hearing no." The slap rang out sharp and sudden, echoing across the half-empty room. A few guests turned to look. Clara's face flushed scarlet, her eyes glistening. Without another word, she turned and ran. Damian stood motionless, fingertips brushing the sting on his cheek. In his expression, not anger, but surprise and a flicker of intrigue. For the first time, Someone had dared to reject him. Clara, meanwhile, burst into the night, breath ragged, cheeks burning, eyes blurred with tears. She couldn't recall how she reached the subway. All she knew was the ache in her palm still burning from the slap, and the deeper pain lodged in her chest. She swore to herself she would never look back. That slap haunted Clara for days. She couldn't remember how she had fled the hotel, only that while rushing past the reception desk, something had fallen at her feet. A stiff card, silver-edged, the name gleaming, Damien Cole, Cole Technologies. She had wanted to throw it away, but her trembling hand slipped it into her pocket, as if keeping a cursed secret. She never thought she would need to see that card again, until 3 days later. That gray afternoon, Clara's phone buzzed violently. On the other end, her neighbor sobbed, "Clara, come quick. Your mother." She collapsed. Clara raced to the hospital. In the emergency room, her mother lay motionless, skin pale, lips cracked. Clara gripped her frail hand, throat tightening. "Doctor, please, how is she?" The physician looked her in the eyes, heavy with sympathy. "A rapidly growing ovarian tumor. Surgery is urgent. The total cost, $60,000 and no insurance coverage." 60,000. The number slammed into Clara like a stone, crushing what little hope she had. For her, even 600 meant scraping by for a month. No, I can't possibly." Tears burned down her cheeks. They gave her exactly 3 days to gather the money. 3 days. A ticking sentence. Clara collapsed into a waiting room chair, burying her face in her hands. Something pressed against her palm inside her pocket. She pulled it out, the silver-edged business card. She clenched it, feeling as though she held a blade. "No, I won't call him. I'll find another way. I have to." But then the image of her mother, unconscious behind ICU glass, smothered the voice. That night, Clara sat motionless in the hospital waiting room. Her cracked phone screen lit up as her thumb hovered over the numbers. She typed, deleted, typed again, deleted. By the 10th time, tears blurred the screen. Her trembling hand pressed call. The line rang 3 times. "Clara," the deep, cold voice. He knew immediately who it was. Her throat burned, she forced the words out. "Your offer. Is it still on the table?" A few seconds of silence, then steady, unshaken. "Where are you?" "Midtown Hospital, emergency wing." 15 minutes. Right on time, Damien appeared. No suit, just a white shirt and dark jeans, yet the chill of his presence lingered. He looked at Clara once, expression unreadable. "How much?" Her whisper cracked. 60,000. Damien pulled out his phone, dialed. "Transfer 60,000. Now." He ended the call, eyes never leaving hers. Clara's chest ached. She drew in a trembling breath, voice barely above a whisper. "Just one night." He gave a single nod. No pity, no warmth, only cold certainty. In that moment, Clara knew her life had crossed into a path she could never turn back from. At exactly 9 that night, Clara stood before the towering glass skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The night sky was a velvet curtain, and the city lights shimmered against the building like thousands of artificial stars. She drew a long breath, clutching the strap of her worn handbag. Inside were only a few small belongings, fragments of her life carried into this bargain for her mother's survival. The elevator doors slid shut, carrying her upward to the 70th floor. Neither of them spoke. Only Clara's heartbeat filled her ears, pounding like war drums. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world entirely. The penthouse stretched vast and silent, golden light reflecting off the glass walls that revealed the city below. Minimalist furniture, expensive, clinical, Italian leather, rare artwork she had only ever seen in library magazines. Everything was too perfect, too cold, as if she had entered a museum instead of a home. Damien walked ahead, removing his coat, hanging it neatly. "Would you like a drink?" His voice rolled low, calm. Clara shook her head. She didn't trust her voice to hold steady. "Don't be afraid," he continued, pouring himself whiskey. "You can stop at any time. I won't force you." She heard the words, but her heart whispered otherwise. Stop? After taking the money? After stepping into this place? The door behind her already felt locked. She stood frozen in the living room, clutching her bag. Just one night. For Mother. Just one night. Damien set his glass down, eyes never leaving her. His steps toward her were slow, deliberate, as though he had long mastered the art of being obeyed without question. With each one, Clara's chest tightened. "You're trembling." Clara's voice quivered, barely audible. "I've never, with anyone." He paused. No surprise on his face, only a flicker of darkness in his gaze. "Never?" She nodded, eyes downcast. No mocking, no smirk. He simply placed the glass aside and moved closer. Clara shut her eyes, swallowing back tears. His hands were precise, careful, as though unwrapping something fragile. Yet the coldness in his gaze made her feel like nothing more than an object, rare and costly, purchased at auction. When her dress fell, leaving only plain white undergarments, Clara shivered violently. Not from cold, but from knowing she was losing something she could never regain. "You're beautiful," Damien murmured, his voice like a winter draft through an open window. But Clara did not feel beautiful. She felt hollow, as though what mattered most within her was slipping away. That night, she said nothing. No tears spilled, only muffled sobs bitten back into silence. Her body reacted with confusion, while her heart screamed no. When it was over, Damien disappeared into the bathroom. Clara lay still, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She was no longer the girl who had walked into this room. Something inside her had died quietly. She dressed in silence. By the time Damien returned, hair damp, robe loose, she was ready to leave. Without a backward glance, she opened the door and slipped into the endless hallway. The elevator carried her down, slowly, prolonging the torment. Outside, the night wind lashed her face, sharp and cold, yet powerless against the fire of grief burning inside. Clara walked away, never looking back. She knew this night had stolen from her something she could never reclaim. 2 weeks after that fateful night in the penthouse, Clara tried to live as if nothing had happened. She returned to her nursing classes, picked up weekend shifts. On the surface, life moved on. But inside, she felt hollow, like an empty shell. She avoided mirrors, scrubbed her hands until they burned, as if she could wash away the stain clinging to her skin. At night, she lay curled in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the echo of emptiness inside her chest. One morning, while changing sheets during hospital training, dizziness struck her hard. The hallway spun, and she collapsed. Colleagues helped her up, assuring her it was probably just exhaustion. But when it happened a third time within 2 days, fear grew sharp inside her. Clara bought a pregnancy test at a small pharmacy near her apartment. In the cramped bathroom, she sat on the closed toilet lid, hands trembling. The minutes dragged like hours, 2 red lines, clear, undeniable. It felt like falling into a bottomless pit. The test slipped from her fingers, clattering against the tile. She buried her face in her hands, too shocked to even cry. No, this can't be. I'm only 18. Yet the truth lived inside her. Clara's hand shook as she pressed it against her flat stomach. Within her grew a tiny life. Not born of love, not of choice, but of a cold transaction. That night, Clara sat on her bed, phone glowing in her hand. The name Damien Cole still lived in her contacts. She stared at it, thumb trembling over the screen. Call, cancel, call again, delete. At last, she drew a shaky breath and pressed dial. The line rang 3 times. Clara. His voice, deep, calm, unsurprised. Her throat tightened. I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. Silence. Then a short, dry laugh. You're joking. No, I tested 3 times. Her voice cracked. The air on his end turned to steel. And you're certain? It's mine? The question cut Clara like glass. I've never been with anyone else. Then don't think you can use this to trap me, Damien snapped, voice sharp and cold. I'm not the kind of man fooled by cheap tricks. If you're looking for money, you're wasting your time. I'm not asking for money, Clara cried, voice breaking. I just thought you should know. The call ended. No goodbye. Clara stared at the black screen, body numb. It was crueler than that night in the penthouse. That night had stolen her innocence. Tonight had stolen her last shred of hope. After the cold rejection on the phone, Clara never dared to call Damien again. But in the long, sleepless nights, in her damp little rented room, she sat at her wooden desk under the weak yellow lamp, pen trembling in her hand. Each word bled onto the page like a confession. I don't want money. I don't expect you to take responsibility. But I believe you should know there's a life growing inside me. Your child. This baby wasn't conceived in love, but it's real. If one day you want to know, I won't hide it. But if you never want to hear my name again, I promise you never will. No tears. Only silence. She folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, wrote the address from the business card, and dropped it into a mailbox, feeling as though she had thrown away part of her soul. She never expected a reply, and for days, none came. On the 71st floor of a glass tower in his office, Damien Cole had once held that envelope in his hand. He frowned, sighed, and shoved it into a drawer unopened. But the nights that followed were restless. Clara's face haunted him, eyes brimming with tears, yet proud, the trembling voice confessing she had never been with anyone else, and the slap that had stunned him. At last, one sleepless night, he pulled the letter back out. He read it once, then again. No blame, no begging. Just truth, written with calm that hurt more than anger. That silence cut him like a blade. Damien could not sleep. For the first time in his life, something weighed heavy in his chest. Guilt. With quiet influence, he began to search. A few calls, a push of financial power, and he discovered Clara was still studying nursing and had been visiting a small maternity clinic in the Bronx. 3 days later, a sleek car pulled up outside that clinic. Damien stepped out. No tailored suit tonight, just a shirt and dark coat. Yet people instinctively gave way as he passed. Clara stood at the bottom of the steps, clutching a canvas bag, her other hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. When she saw him, she froze, eyes wide with alarm. What are you doing here?" Her voice cracked, weary, guarded. "I read your letter," Damien said, his tone low, edged with hesitation. Clara gripped the bag tighter. "I told you, I don't need anything from you." "I know." He took a step closer, then stopped. His voice softened. "But I need to know, and I want to be here." "It's too late," Clara whispered, turning away, her voice like ash. His gaze flicked briefly to her stomach before rising again. "How far along?" 11 weeks. They stood facing each other on the noisy Bronx street, where no one cared about the strange encounter unfolding. "I want to help," Damien said slowly, deliberately. Clara let out a brittle, humorless laugh. "Help? How? You only know how to buy everything you want." He paused, silent for a breath. "Maybe, but this time I won't walk away. Not again." The wind stirred between them. Clara looked at him, eyes conflicted. She didn't nod, didn't agree. But most importantly, she didn't walk away. From that day on, Damien began to appear at her prenatal appointments. No warnings, no excuses. He simply sat in the waiting room chairs, steady, silent. In the first weeks, Damien's repeated presence at the clinic unsettled Clara more than it comforted her. He sat quietly beside her, rarely speaking, sometimes offering her a bottle of water or a packet of ginger cookies. "What are these for?" Clara asked sharply one day, eyeing the small paper bag left on the chair. "I heard ginger helps with nausea," Damien replied simply. She frowned, pushing the bag back. "I don't need guilt gifts." He paused for a moment, then nodded. He didn't insist. But the next time, instead of gifts, he handed her a chilled bottle of orange juice. She meant to refuse, but her parched throat betrayed her, and her hand reached out. Clara realized Damien wasn't going to vanish. He was patient, silent, but persistent. And over time, that persistence both wore her down and cracked the walls she had built inside. One afternoon after an appointment, Damien spoke unexpectedly. "Move in with me." Clara's head snapped toward him. "Are you insane?" "I'm not the same room," he interrupted calmly. "I have a large apartment, 2 bedrooms. You'll have your own space, I won't interfere. But at least I'll know you and the baby are cared for properly." Clara went silent. She wanted to refuse, to scream she didn't need him. But memories of her damp apartment, the leaking ceiling, and the worsening nausea clogged her throat. After a long pause, she sighed. "Fine, but this isn't us. It's temporary." "Temporary is fine," Damien said. Damien's glass-walled apartment was vast and unnervingly quiet. Clara moved in with only a couple of small suitcases, feeling like an intruder in a world that wasn't hers. They lived like parallel lines. Clara cooked for herself, did her own laundry, kept her distance. Damien often came home late, surviving on takeout or skipping meals altogether. Yet, within that distance, small things began to shift. One morning, Clara woke to find a glass of warm water with lemon waiting on the kitchen counter. She froze briefly, then drank it without leaving thanks. Another night, a sudden wave of nausea knocked her off balance. Clara stumbled to the bathroom, but when she looked up, Damien was already at the doorway, holding a warm towel and a glass of water. "Go away," she snapped, voice breaking. He said nothing, only extended the towel. His hand trembled slightly, but his eyes were disarmingly sincere. Clara hesitated, then took it. In the days that followed, Clara noticed Damien's attentiveness to the smallest details. He opened the windows each morning because she liked fresh air. He walked softly at night, careful not to wake her. He never forced conversation, but he listened whenever she spoke. And Clara, despite her defenses, began to feel something shift. One evening, they sat together in the living room. She read. He worked on his laptop. No words passed, yet the silence felt strangely peaceful. When Damien placed his hand on her belly for the first time to feel the baby move, Clara stiffened. His hand was warm, not possessive, not rushed, just quiet, respectful presence. She didn't pull his hand away. And in that silence, something fragile began to change. Winter arrived quietly. The city wore a thin veil of fog, wind slicing through the streets like icy blades. Clara, 9 months pregnant, moved heavily, yet her eyes carried a calmness she had never known before. One early morning, while Damien worked in his office, Clara was pouring water in the kitchen when a sharp pain gripped her back and spread across her belly. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. She doubled over, clutching her stomach, gasping. Damien rushed out at the sound. Clara's face was pale, sweat pouring down. "It's time," she whispered, lips trembling. Without a word, Damien grabbed his coat and helped her to the car. On the drive, his hands clenched the wheel until his knuckles whitened, eyes fixed on the foggy road. Clara sat beside him, one hand pressed to her belly, the other clawing the door handle as the contractions racked her body. At the hospital, Clara was taken into the delivery room. Damien was left in the cold hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with tension. He paced endlessly, eyes on the slow-moving clock. Every muffled cry from inside twisted his chest tighter. The man who had once negotiated billion-dollar deals with steady calm now wiped sweat from his palms like a boy lost at sea. A nurse stepped out. "She wants you inside." Damien froze. He had never felt such trembling in his body. Yet without hesitation, he walked in. Clara lay on the bed, hair damp, lips drained of color. When her eyes met his, they softened. "Will you hold my hand?" she whispered, like a plea. Damien gripped her icy hand firmly. "I'm here. Hold on, Clara." Another contraction seized her. She screamed, her body curling with the pain. Damien bent close, murmuring into her ear, "You're doing so well. Just a little more." He had never seen such strength in someone so small. Amid the beeping machines and the urgent commands of doctors, he held her hand, the single tether binding them through the storm. And then, a cry split the air. High, clear, strong. "A healthy baby boy," the doctor said with a smile. A tiny, wrinkled bundle was placed in Damien's arms. For the first time, his hands trembled, not with fear, but with awe. The fragility of life weighed heavy in his chest. He stared at the baby's tiny face, fists curled tight. A part of him, something real in a world built on control. "Ethan," he whispered. "His name is Ethan." Clara lay drained on the bed, eyes blurred with tears. She watched Damien hold the child, careful, tentative, almost afraid to harm him. In that instant, she saw a man she had never known. Not cold, not powerful, but fragile, profoundly human. She reached out, touching Ethan's cheek, then lifted her gaze to Damien. Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "You're different." Damien looked up, and in his eyes flickered something Clara had never seen before. Not dominance, not ice, but the trembling spark of love, fragile, unpolished, yet utterly real. The first days after Ethan's birth were a storm. Midnight cries, the sour scent of spilled milk, diapers piled high. Clara was exhausted, yet for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. Damien practically moved his work into the apartment. His laptop sat on the living room table, headset always ready. But his eyes strayed constantly to the crib beside him. Each time Ethan stirred, he looked up, abandoning meetings just to make sure the baby was safe. At first, Clara thought it was temporary. But as days passed, Damien never left. He devoured childcare books, watched tutorials, even practiced swaddling Ethan on an old doll he bought from a toy store. The first time he changed a diaper was chaos. Clara couldn't help laughing despite her exhaustion. His brows furrowed, his hands, once steady signing million-dollar deals, now shook over sticky tabs and wipes. "You're doing it all wrong?" Clara said, half amused, half exasperated. "Then I'll just do it again," Damien replied, voice low but firm. And he did, until the diaper was snug and Ethan slept peacefully. At night, when Ethan cried, Clara usually sprang up instinctively. But more than once she found Damien already pacing the hallway, cradling the baby, his deep voice murmuring, "Shh, Daddy's here." Clara stood in the doorway, her shadow stretching across the dim floor, watching. For a moment she couldn't reconcile this man with the one who had once spoken cruel bargains. One evening, after rocking Ethan to sleep, Damien collapsed onto the sofa, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled. Clara set a cup of tea before him. "You don't have to do everything," she said softly. He met her gaze, his eyes tired but bright. "I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. For him. And for you." The words left Clara speechless. It had been so long since her heart trembled with something other than fear. Now it stirred with warmth. Time moved on, and amid the early chaos they found rhythm. Clara fed the baby, Damien cleaned. He bathed Ethan clumsily, splashing water everywhere, but his gentleness made it impossible for Clara to scold him. Every morning, Damien left warm water and simple breakfast ready. Every night, when Clara was too tired, he held Ethan so she could sleep a little longer. They spoke little, made no promises. Yet in those small gestures, something unspoken grew. Connection. One quiet evening, the three of them stayed in the living room. Ethan slept soundly in his crib. Clara read her book. Damien typed on his laptop. The click of keys, the rustle of pages, the baby's even breaths. Together, they formed a fragile piece. Clara lifted her eyes to Damien. The man who had once lived only for power now sat rumpled, hair messy, watching his son with unguarded tenderness. She smiled faintly, and in that smile, trust began to return. Time passed, and Ethan grew day by day, his babbling laughter filling the once cold apartment with warmth. Clara changed too. She no longer looked at Damien with only suspicion. The distance between them still existed, but it was no longer a wall, more like a bridge slowly being built with quiet gestures. Damien rarely spoke much, yet every morning, a glass of warm water waited on the kitchen counter. On rainy nights, he made clumsy soup, imperfect in taste but rich in care. He was no longer the man who thought money could fix everything. His small actions spoke louder than any grand promises. One evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Clara found Damien sitting silently on the sofa, eyes fixed on the crib. She set a cup of tea before him. He looked up, and something in his gaze softened. "Clara," he said slowly, his voice husky, "I don't know when it happened, but I love you." The words cut and healed all at once. Clara's heart trembled, her hands shaking slightly. Memories of that fateful night surged back, yet when she met his eyes, she no longer saw the cold man from then. Instead, she saw vulnerability, honesty. "You're not the man from that night anymore," she whispered. "I haven't forgotten, but I see you've changed." Damien didn't defend himself, didn't make grand speeches. He simply held her gaze, letting her see the truth in his eyes. Weeks later, on a gentle spring morning, they brought Ethan to Central Park. Sunlight streamed through the trees, scattering gold across the dew-kissed grass. Clara sat on a wooden bench, cradling Ethan, his small breaths warm against her chest. Damien stood quietly for a moment, as if gathering courage. Then he stepped forward, a small navy velvet box in his hand. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he just looked at Clara, as though memorizing the sight of her. "Clara," he said, voice low but steady, "I once thought I had everything. Money, power, control. But I had nothing. Not you, not this family. I don't want to own you or bind you. I just want to walk beside you, freely, without conditions." He opened the box. Inside lay no diamond, no glittering stone, just a simple silver band that gleamed softly in the morning light. "Will you marry me?" Damien asked, unhurried, as though offering his fragile heart. Clara's throat tightened, her vision blurred with tears. The wounds she had carried so long felt touched by an invisible hand, soothed and slowly healed. She nodded. Tears slipped down. No longer pain, but release. Damien slid the ring onto her finger, then clasped her hand gently. No grand promises, only quiet sincerity. That morning, beneath the clear spring sky, with the rustling of trees and the steady breaths of a sleeping child, a real family was born. 6 months after that morning in Central Park, when Damien had knelt with a simple silver ring, their wedding took place in the very same spot. There were no silk drapes, no extravagant flowers, no orchestra. Only a fresh spring morning, the breeze rustling through the old tree's branches, and a few wooden chairs arranged around its roots. Clara wore a plain white linen dress, her hair tied back loosely, a few strands falling softly in the wind. In her arms, 8-month-old Ethan babbled happily, his bright eyes adding laughter to the ceremony. Damien stood beside her, not in a tailored suit, but in a pale blue shirt with sleeves rolled up. Simple, warm, and genuine. The guests were few, but each was meaningful. Clara's mother, once fragile and fading in a hospital bed, now sat in the front row, healthy after her surgery. Her eyes glistened as she watched her daughter in a wedding dress. She whispered softly, "You've come such a long way, Clara." Clara turned, her gaze filled with gratitude, and held her mother's hand tightly. The ceremony needed no minister, no elaborate vows. Damien spoke first, his eyes fixed on Clara, his voice low but steady. "I promise to love you, not with grand words, but with the small actions of every day." Clara's voice trembled, but she answered, "I promise to stand beside you, not as someone in debt, but as a partner." Finally, hand in hand, they spoke almost in unison. "We promise not to control, not to possess, but to choose each other every single day." A gentle breeze stirred, scattering leaves. Ethan clapped his tiny hands, bursting into laughter, drawing smiles from everyone present. In that moment, it felt as if even the sky was blessing them. After the ceremony, there was no lavish banquet. Only a wooden table draped with a white cloth, topped with warm pastries, jars of wildflowers, and glasses of lemonade. They ate together, laughed together, and snapped a few simple photos. Clara sat back, taking it all in, her heart swelling with warmth. A year ago, she had believed her life had ended in a cold, dark night. Yet here she was, beneath the clear spring sky, with her mother at her side. A man who had changed by her side, and the child sleeping softly in her arms. She knew then, this was not an ending, but the true beginning of a family.